I am a big Mark Hoppus fan. I'm a big Blink-182 fan. They were the band that really got me into music when I was younger. I still love them now. I've seen them live a couple of times. And the last time I saw them back in 2023, I think, might have been last year, 2023, I think the tail end of that. They were so good live and they really seemed happy on stage. And Tom's vocals are still pretty terrible at times, but I love the band so much. I love all of them. Um, so I was very interested when Mark Hoppus announced he was going to do a book, and I bought the Audible version where he narrates the book himself, and he talks a bit about his life growing up. His dad was in the army, or something to do with the army and military weapons. Um, his dad became sort of a distant figure, and it was mostly him and his mum, didn't have a lot of money. Mark's always struck me as someone who's very in touch with his emotions and is very sensitive. And that's where a lot of his incredible lyrics come from. And he is a little bit like me in a way, where I can see he can be extremely enthusiastic and happy and like a cheeky, chappy type guy, but he can also struggle with the darkness of being a human being in this world. And so that's why I think he's so great, because he's just so authentic. You feel like you know this guy. But I was really interested to see what he would talk about when it came to the split from Tom, even though it seems a bit irrelevant now because they're doing so well together, but also his feelings on Angels and Airwaves. And I was a little bit surprised because for me, We Don't Need to Whisper, the first album by Angels and Airwaves, as I'm guessing most of you watching this will know, was such a good album. Apart from the fact Do It For Me Now is a live version, but it's just like he's not even singing it live. Like it's exact same soundtrack with cheering at the start and end. Really weird. But I think that album is great. I think it really did test some new ideas out with instrumentation. I thought the drums were killer. You've got songs like War. That is what it's called, right? I haven't listened to it for a while. Obviously, The Adventure, the first song they put out or that got leaked, incredible song. The kind of song, if I was going to care enough about what song would be played at my funeral, something like The Adventure is such a good song. But on the other hand, I also thought When Your Heart Stops Beating, the album by Plus 44, was extremely good as well. Bearing in mind it was Mark and Travis and a couple of guys that, you know, were unknown, or maybe people know if they're in previous bands, but I didn't know who they were. For me, the angst and the kind of willingness to prove that I don't need you anymore, Tom. This is my shit, and I'll prove that I'm fucking good, and he did. Some really good songs, like Lycanthrope, the first song on that album, just kicks it off with a banger. When Your Heart Stops Beating, just every song, Baby Come On, all of them are good. But what surprised me is Mark, when he, bearing in mind he's over the whole dispute with Tom now, and he does talk about some of the stuff that happened during that, like legal teams being involved, and he felt very confused because this was his skater buddy from years ago, and now they're suing one another in a way over rights of music and that kind of stuff. And he's like, what the fuck happened, dude? Like, Tom wouldn't even speak to him. And he does honestly give his point of view that Tom is to blame for all of that because he didn't communicate. He kept saying, yeah, we'll do an album, or yeah, we'll do some shows. And then he was like, no, I don't want to anymore. And Mark's like, I want to do this band. I think ultimately it was the wrong timing on both ends, where Tom was trying to be a good dad and a family person, and Mark just wanted to be out there making the most out of their success. You know, we're talking around the 2003, 2004 mark, where their self-titled album was just so good. And they told, well, Mark tells in the book, they spent so much money and time. They were getting a lot of pressure from the record label to finish the album. They're like, look, we know this is going to be a fucking killer album. Do not rush us. We're going to do this in our own time, basically. So I love that. But anyway, Mark pretty much says Angels and Airwaves had a couple of like catchy hits, but most of it was just self-indulgent. I'm like, Jesus, pretty sure Tom wouldn't feel that way. So it makes me wonder, like, did Mark tell Tom, by the way, in my book, I'm going to say that I don't like your other band? But for me, Angels and Airwaves, yeah, I could get that some people might have seen it as like, especially in the beginning where Tom lost the guitar on stage and he started doing all the dancing and shit, it did look a bit like, dude, what are you doing? But it's individual, I suppose, but I think Angels and Airwaves were phenomenal. Again, not good live, and I was quite annoyed at one point because I was going to see them live for the only time I could have gone, and the gig got cancelled very short notice and no apology or reasoning at all. Just like, yeah, sorry, this show in London's not happening anymore. And I'd already booked the hotels and the travel. Ended up going to the theatre instead. But honestly, I think the reason was Mark and Tom were getting, back on talking terms after Mark had got diagnosed with a cancer. And they were maybe in the preparations to rebuild the band. So I'm over it now. And it will always be Blink-182, but Mark's insecurity does come through a bit. And he's self-aware enough to admit that he has some insecurities, because when Tom did Boxcar Racer, which again, given that that was done across a couple of months or a very short period, to put out all those killer songs, do some live shows, like really, really impressive on Tom's part there. Like a very talented, and I wouldn't say underrated, because like he's in one of the biggest pop punk bands ever. You could argue Green Day might be above Blink, but some people would say, like Tom DeLonge is not very good lyrically, or not lyrically, like vocally or on guitar. For me, I completely disagree. I think he's great. But yeah, I highly recommend Fahrenheit 182 was a really good listen. If anything, it felt slightly short. I believe it was about 9 hours long, maybe 9.5. And I was very sad to end it because I just really enjoyed the book. But yeah, Blink-182 forever, baby. Hope they continue for life. I'll always go to their shows if I see an opportunity. If they come back and do some London stuff, I'll be there. Great band live, just great guys.